A silent cathedral of water lies hidden within a cliff. Ancient engineers carved these monumental rock-cut reservoir systems directly into the living earth, and their sophistication forces a complete rethink of history. By the end of this exploration, you will see ancient technology not as primitive, but as an unsustainable survival. We will uncover how deserts were turned into gardens and how cities sieges for centuries, all through a forgotten science of stone and water. What vital lesson from these resilient builders have we forgotten in our modern world? The defining feature of these ancient marvels is not what was built, but what was removed. Picture a single, vast chamber, its ceiling supported by pillars left standing when the rest of the stone was painstakingly carved away. This is the essence of a rock-cut reservoir, a water management system excavated directly into the very bones of the earth, into solid bedrock or stable geological layers. It is a negative architecture, a space defined by what is no longer there. This sets them apart completely from structures built upward with bricks or mortar. Those can crumble. A reservoir carved from a single, unbroken mass of stone, however, becomes a permanent part of the landscape itself. The decision to create one represents a staggering commitment. It means choosing a project that could take generations, demanding an immense, coordinated labor force and a deep, forward-looking vision. This was never a quick fix. It was a declaration of permanence, a statement that a community was here to stay, and its survival was worth 1,000 lifetimes of effort. But to call them mere storage tanks is a profound undersell. These are often complex hydrological engines. Archaeologists find them equipped with sophisticated inlet channels to capture surface water, clever sedimentation tanks that allowed silt and debris to settle before the clean water flowed forward. Intricate staircases for access and maintenance, and sprawling distribution networks of smaller channels. Every facet reveals intention, a deep understanding between engineering and art, between survival and spirituality. The stepwell was a complete system. It managed a precious physical resource while nourishing the community's social and cultural fabric. It acknowledged that for a civilization to be truly resilient, it must cater to both the body and the soul. This holistic approach raises a compelling question. While we marvel at the structural audacity of cutting a palace into the ground, what deeper wisdom about integrating infrastructure into the very heart of daily life have we? In our era of hidden pipes and distant treatment plants, perhaps left behind, yet the stepwells of India represent only one brilliant answer to a universal challenge. Across the Arabian desert, another civilization wrote its own epic of survival directly into the sandstone. The rose-red city of Petra, famed for its tombs carved into cliffs, hides a far greater secret. Its true wonder was not the grand facades for the departed, but the hidden, life-giving veins that sustain the living. The Nabataeans were not merely merchants who built a city in a canyon. They were hydrological architects who built a fortress of water in a land that offered almost none. Their environment was brutally simple, receiving a mere 6 inches of rain in a good year. To thrive here was impossible, to merely survive was a struggle, so they engineered the impossible. They looked at the sheer walls of their desert wadis and saw not barriers, but catchment basins. With meticulous precision, they carved vast, bell-shaped cisterns directly into the canyon's bedrock, creating a hidden network of reservoirs that were invisible from the main passages. Every flash flood, every trickle of seasonal runoff was captured, channeled, and imprisoned in stone. But capturing water was only the first step. The Nabataean genius lay in a distribution system of astonishing sophistication. They constructed miles of narrow, rock-cut channels and pipes, often sealed with a unique, waterproof plaster made from lime and crushed ceramics. This network functioned like a city-wide circulatory system, delivering water under controlled pressure to public fountains, lush garden plots, and even private homes nestled high in the cliffs. The scale of this planning is what truly stuns the modern mind. Scholars estimate Petra, at its height, sustained a population of perhaps 20,000 people, a bustling urban center in the heart of a desert. This was not a scattered oasis settlement, but a dense, thriving metropolis that its environment for centuries. Their system was so effective, so resilient, that it allowed the city to withstand sieges that would have crippled other capitals. When enemies came, they could cut off trade routes, but they could not cut off the rain, and the Nabataeans had already captured every drop. This transforms our understanding of their legacy. The towering treasury, the majestic monastery, these are the monuments of their wealth and artistry. But the silent, dark cisterns carved deep into the mountain are the monuments of their intelligence and foresight. They understood that true power in the desert was not held in a treasury of gold, but in a reservoir of water. This raises a profound point about resilience. We often admire ancient societies for the grandeur they left behind, their temples and palaces. But what if their most enduring triumph was an infrastructure so seamless, so perfectly integrated with the natural world, that it became invisible? What does it mean that a civilization's greatest achievement was not something they built up, but something they carved in? A void that held the very essence of life, but a city's survival depends on more than just capturing water. It demands securing it against all threats. For this final, breathtaking evolution of the RockCut reservoir, we must look to an empire that turned water into a weapon of defense. The city of Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire, was a glittering jewel perpetually encircled by enemies. Its legendary land walls were considered impregnable, but its rulers understood a brutal truth: even the strongest fortress can fall if its people are thirsty. So, while enemies plotted above ground, Byzantine engineers orchestrated a silent, strategic masterpiece beneath it. They created a hidden, inverted landscape, a secret world of water carved and vaulted directly into the city's foundation. The most famous of these, the Basilica Cistern, feels less like a storage tank and more like a submerged palace. Stretching the length of 2 football fields, its cavernous darkness is held aloft by a forest of 336 marble columns, many repurposed from earlier classical ruins, standing in silent, reflective water. This was psychological architecture as much as hydraulic engineering. To descend into that cool, echoing space was to witness the empire's profound, almost sacred commitment to preservation. Yet this single, glorious cistern was just one chamber in a vast, subterranean network. The true genius of Constantinople lay in its system. Engineers constructed aqueducts that spanned hundreds of kilometers, channeling water from distant highland springs into the city by gravity alone. This required a near-magical understanding of slope and pressure, ensuring a constant, reliable flow across an astonishing distance. But bringing the water in was only half the battle. Beneath the streets, it was distributed into a redundant web of hundreds of public and private cisterns, some rock-cut, others built with brick vaults. This design was deliberate strategic brilliance. If one aqueduct was cut or a cistern compromised, others would continue to function. The city could not be starved of water by a single point of failure. During the great sieges that tested the empire, this hidden resource was the ultimate strategic reserve. While armies camped outside the walls, life within could continue for months, even years. The public fountains still flowed, the bathhouses remained open, and the morale of the populace held firm. The knowledge here was not merely about storage, but about hydrostatic pressure, preventing contamination in vast, still bodies of water and creating a resilient, distributed network. Constantinople's engineers transformed geography itself into a shield. They understood that a civilization's most vital resource must be rendered untouchable, buried so deep within the earth, and so woven into the urban fabric that it became as permanent as the bedrock itself. This moves us beyond the concept of mere sustainability into the realm of assured survival. It presents a haunting question for our own time. We live in an age of visible, centralized infrastructure, of towering dams and exposed pipelines. What vulnerabilities do we create when all our vital systems are laid bare on the surface? The silent, distributed depth of Constantinople's hidden seas offered a form of security that was both physical and profoundly psychological, a lesson in resilience written not in stone, but in the dark. Still water beneath it, this silent testimony of stability is perhaps the greatest puzzle of all. We must confront the physical reality of the task, a reality that makes the mind boggle. Envision a team of ancient workers standing before an unyielding cliff of granite or limestone. Their objective is not to build upon it, but to carve a cavernous void within it, a space large enough to hold millions of gallons of water, and to do so with such precision that it will stand unsupported for. They had no dynamite, no jackhammers, no structural steel beams. Their tools were fire, water, bronze, iron, and an almost unimaginable reservoir of collective will. The primary method, inferred from tool marks and archaeological evidence, was a technique known as fire setting. Workers would build a hot, focused fire directly against the rock face. Once the stone was superheated, they would suddenly douse it with cold water. The dramatic thermal shock would cause the rock to fracture and split, creating cracks and weaknesses that could then be exploited with metal picks and chisels. It was a brutal, slow, and dangerous process, generating toxic fumes and relentless clouds of rock dust. Each cubic foot of stone removed represented hours of coordinated, exhausting labor. But here is where mere effort transforms into genius. Anyone can dig a hole, but to dig a colossal, self-supporting cavity in living rock requires a deep, intuitive conversation with the earth itself. These engineers were master listeners. They understood that different types of stone had different personalities. Granite was stubborn but monolithic. Limestone was softer but could be porous. They learned to read the natural fault lines and bedding planes within the rock, using these inherent weaknesses to guide their excavation, rather than fighting against them. Their architectural choices reveal this profound empirical knowledge. The walls of these reservoirs were rarely carved perfectly vertical. Instead, they were often given a slight inward taper, like the sides of a massive, buried pyramid. This simple design is a fundamental principle of load distribution, transferring the immense weight of the overlying earth and rock down into the wider base, preventing the walls from buckling inward. And then there are the pillars. In the largest chambers, like those beneath Constantinople or within the great Stepwells, the workers did not clear the entire space. They left strategic columns of the native bedrock standing as they carved everything else away. These were not added later for support. They were integral, born from the same stone as the floor and ceiling. Each pillar is a testament to foresight, a calculated decision made at the outset of a project that might outlive its planners by centuries. This is the core of the marvel. It was not reckless excavation. It was a form of sculptural subtraction guided by an innate understanding of physics and geology. They weren't just removing rock, they were revealing a structure that was, in a philosophical sense, already latent within it, the negative shape of a stable, enduring space. The proof of their mastery is in the enduring silence. The overwhelming majority of these ancient reservoirs have not collapsed. They stand today, hollow and dark, not as ruins, but as functioning voids. Their longevity is their loudest proclamation. It tells us that these builders possessed a science of stability, a geotechnical wisdom earned through observation, trial, and a respectful dialogue with the very bones of the planet. It forces us to ask, what foundational knowledge, passed down through generations of hands-on work with stone, have we lost in our age of computer models and synthetic materials, yet the perfect container is meaningless if it remains forever empty? This brings us to the second, equally brilliant half of the ancient equation, the sophisticated hydrological intelligence required to fill these stone lungs with life. Creating the reservoir was a monumental feat of engineering, but filling it was in understanding the invisible language of the landscape. This was never a passive act of waiting for rain to fall into an open hole. It was an aggressive, proactive campaign of water harvesting, a deliberate orchestration of the entire water cycle from cloud to cistern. Ancient engineers did not just build receptacles, they became cartographers of water itself. Their first task was to listen to the land, to map the secret anatomy of their local watershed with an intimacy we can scarcely comprehend today. They learned to read the subtle slopes of a hillside, the convergence patterns of seasonal runoff, and the hidden veins of groundwater that pulsed beneath the surface. This deep observational science was their most critical survival tool. On the sun-baked cliffs of Petra, for instance, this knowledge reached its zenith. The Nabataeans understood that their city, nestled in a deep canyon, was not the source of water, but its ultimate destination. They looked far beyond their walls into the surrounding highlands. There, in distant, dry riverbeds known as wadis, they constructed low, clever diversion dams made of stone. These were not dams to create lakes, but hydrological switches. When the rare, violent flash flood roared down the wadi after a desert storm, these structures would intercept the torrent, deftly diverting a portion of that chaotic, sediment-laden flow into meticulously graded channels. These channels, often carved directly into the rock faces of the surrounding mountains, acted as artificial arteries, guiding the captured floodwater over kilometers of terrain. Down into the waiting cisterns carved within the city itself, they were turning the desert's most destructive force into its most precious gift. But capturing wild floodwater was only part of the strategy. In other regions, engineers demonstrated a gentler, more refined touch. They developed filtration galleries, known as qanats in Persia or in North Africa. These were horizontal tunnels dug deep into the base of a mountain, sometimes for miles, to gently tap into a water-bearing aquifer. The tunnel would have a slight, consistent slope, just enough for the water to seep in and flow by gravity to the surface, emerging as a clean, reliable spring. This was water mining of the most sustainable kind, a technology that created oases in the desert for thousands of years. And before any water, whether from a diverted flood or a gentle seep, entered the main reservoir, it almost always passed through a final stage of refinement, the sedimentation basin. This was a smaller preliminary chamber where the rushing water was forced to slow and expand. As the water's velocity dropped, the suspended silt, sand, and debris would settle to the bottom. Only then would the clearer water from the top of this basin flow through a connecting channel into the main, pristine storage tank. This simple yet profound step protected the reservoir's capacity from slowly filling with mud and ensured the stored water was of a quality suitable for drinking. Every component of this system, the distant dam, the mountain channel, the settling tank, reveals a holistic mindset. These builders saw water not as a series of isolated events, but as a continuous journey from sky to stone. They intervened at every stage of that journey with tailored solutions. This proactive management of a natural resource speaks to a philosophy that is both humble and profoundly ambitious. It is humble because it works in concert with natural forces, guiding rather than conquering them. It is ambitious because it seeks to impose a lasting order on the chaos of climate, to build a bridge of certainty across the uncertain gap between drought and deluge. So we are left with a compelling duality. The RockCut reservoir is a testament to both immense physical labor and immense intellectual labor. It represents the muscle to carve a mountain and the mind to map the rain. But a reservoir full of water is not yet a reservoir full of life. The monumental challenge of carving the stone was only the first act in a much longer performance. Once captured, that precious liquid had to be kept not just contained, but clean, clear, and safe for human consumption over seasons, sometimes even years. Storing vast quantities of water without modern chemicals or filtration systems, and preventing it from turning into a stagnant, algae-choked breeding ground for illness, required a sophisticated, almost biological understanding of the environment they had created. This reveals a final, critical layer of ancient wisdom, one that moves beyond brute force engineering and into the delicate science of preservation. They knew that the true enemy was not the absence of water, but its decay. The very design of the RockCut reservoir provided the first, fundamental defense. By being excavated deep into the earth, these chambers existed in a realm of remarkable thermal stability. Shielded from the direct heat of the sun and the daily fluctuations of surface temperature, the water within remained significantly cooler. This cool, dark environment was inherently hostile to the rapid growth of algae and many harmful bacteria, which thrive in warm, sunlit conditions. It was passive climate control, engineered by depth alone. Then there was the matter of keeping the water itself calm and clear. Many systems featured ingeniously designed inlet channels that discharged water into the reservoir in a gentle, diffuse manner. Imagine a stream entering not with a disruptive splash, but with a quiet, spreading flow. This careful introduction prevented the violent disturbance of any silt or sediments that had already settled peacefully to the bottom. By letting the water find its own level slowly, they maintained distinct layers, cleaner water above, debris safely sequestered below. In some stepwells and cisterns, evidence suggests a move from passive design to active ecosystem management. Historical accounts and local traditions point to the intentional introduction of certain aquatic plants, like algae-eating species or even small fish. These organisms would have served as natural biocontrol agents, consuming insect larvae and helping to balance the miniature ecosystem within the stone tank. This is a breathtaking concept, the idea of curating a living, self-regulating water garden inside a carved mountain. Furthermore, the materials themselves played a medicinal role. The lime-based plaster used to seal countless cisterns, from Petra to Constantinople, was more than just a waterproof barrier. Lime, a basic compound, naturally raises the pH of water, creating an alkaline environment that is less hospitable to many pathogens. Without knowing the precise microbiology, these builders had stumbled upon a rudimentary but effective sanitizing agent, their very mortar contributing to public health. This holistic attention to potability is what ultimately separates a mere hole in the ground from a life-sustaining institution. It demonstrates a profound understanding that the engineering mission did not end when the last stone chip was swept away. The system's purpose was to deliver not just water, but safe water. This integration of hydraulic design with principles of sanitation and health reflects a worldview where infrastructure was not a separate, utilitarian entity, but an intimate extension of the community's well-being. They engineered for resilience, yes, but also for purity. It forces a humbling reflection. In our modern world, we have delegated the safety of our water to distant, invisible treatment plants and complex chemical processes. These ancient custodians, however, had to build that safety directly into the fabric of their creation, designing every aspect, from the depth of the chamber to the chemistry of the plaster, to guard the vitality of their most precious resource. Their success, measured in centuries of reliable use, stands as a quiet testament to a science that listened not just to the flow of water, but to the delicate conditions required to keep it alive. Yet a reservoir, no matter how brilliantly carved or meticulously maintained, is only a silent vault. Its true purpose is realized in the moment water leaves its darkness and enters the daily life of a community. This final, critical phase transforms engineering into civilization. The grand cisterns and stepwells were not isolated monuments, but the beating hearts within a vast, capillary network of distribution. From the main chamber, life branched outward through a meticulously planned system of smaller rock-cut channels, pipes, and gravity-fed aqueducts. This network was the physical manifestation of a society's priorities, its values, and its very structure. The destination of these water lines paints a vivid social map. Public fountains, often placed at central crossroads or near market squares, were nodes of communal life. Here, water was not a private commodity, but a shared public trust. The constant, reliable flow from a public spout guaranteed that every member of the community, regardless of personal wealth, had access to the fundamental resource of survival. It was a powerful equalizer, a daily reinforcement of a basic social contract. Similarly, water directed to public bathhouses served more than hygiene. They were centers of social interaction, relaxation, and even ritual cleansing in many cultures. The knowledge required here was deeply sociological. Planners and engineers had to calculate not just water pressure and pipe diameter, but also pedestrian traffic patterns, the needs of different districts, and the rhythms of daily life. They were designing for equity, ensuring that the lifeblood of the city reached its communal lungs. But this same network could also delineate lines of privilege and power. Controlled channels might divert a portion of the flow to the palaces of rulers, the estates of elites, or the inner sanctums of major temples. In these contexts, water became a symbol of status or a component of sacred ceremony. Exclusive access to a private garden fountain or a ritual bathing pool reinforced social hierarchies. making abundance and purity a visible marker of authority or divine favor. This duality is essential to understand. The RockCut reservoir system was a neutral tool of incredible sophistication, but its application was deeply human. It could be wielded to foster cohesion, ensuring collective survival through shared, reliable access. Conversely, its flow could be meticulously managed to underscore difference, to reward loyalty, or to sanctify authority. The engineers who designed these networks, therefore, were not just masters of hydraulics, they were unconscious architects of social order. They translated abstract concepts of fairness, privilege, and ritual into the very concrete language of stone channels and clay pipes. The silent testimony lies in the archaeology of distribution. A city with numerous, well-spaced public fountains suggests a civic ethos geared toward broad welfare. A system where the cleanest, most reliable flow leads exclusively to an acropolis or a royal quarter tells a different story of concentrated power. This forces us to see these ancient systems in their full complexity. They represent a fusion of technical mastery and social intelligence. The water had to be moved, yes, but the more profound question was always, moved for whom and to what end? The answer, etched into the landscape, reveals not just how a civilization managed its water, but how it managed itself. This deep time of water wisdom presents a profound chronological puzzle. If we seek to understand when humanity first mastered this art of carving stability from stone, we find ourselves not with a clear date, but standing at the edge of a vast, murky well of time. Dating these monumental structures is one of archaeology's most stubborn challenges. Unlike a building made of wood or brick, a reservoir carved from bedrock contains almost no organic material, no charcoal from fires, no wooden support beams, no seeds or plant fibers trapped in mortar. These are the usual treasures that allow for radiocarbon dating, providing a snapshot of the moment the material lived. A rock-cut chamber, however, is simply a void. It is an absence, and you cannot carbon date a space. So how do we pin a calendar to a cavity? Archaeologists become detectives of context. They meticulously scour the floor of a drained reservoir, hoping to find fragments of pottery that may have been dropped during its construction or initial use. They study any inscriptions carved into the entrance walls, though these often commemorate a later renovation, not the original creation. They analyze the style of any associated architecture, like the carved pillars or staircases, comparing them to other, better-dated sites. But each piece of evidence comes with a caveat. A piece of pottery found at the bottom might have washed in centuries after the reservoir was built. An inscription might proudly state that a king restored a pre-existing, already ancient structure. The architecture we see might be the final, polished form of a project that began generations earlier. The reservoir itself holds its secrets tightly, often proving to be far older than the most obvious clues suggest. This leads to a fascinating phenomenon of architectural palimpsest, especially visible in the great stepwells of India. At sites like Rani Vav, we do not see a single, frozen moment in time. Instead, we witness layers of history carved atop one another. The basic, functional staircase of one era is later embellished with exquisite devotional sculptures. A simple water channel is expanded into an ornate pavilion centuries later. These structures were not built and forgotten. They were living, evolving organs of the community, upgraded and refined across dozens of generations. This continual adaptation makes pinning down a true birth date almost meaningless. The The knowledge was not a one-time invention, but a tradition that was nurtured, deepened, and passed down. When we push the timeline back as far as it can go, the implications become staggering. At the site of a major center of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, archaeologists have uncovered a complex, citywide water management system featuring massive rock-cut reservoirs. This civilization flourished over 4,000 years ago. Their engineers were capturing seasonal monsoon floods, channeling them through silt-trapping tanks, and storing the water in these meticulously carved stone basins to sustain a bustling urban population through the long dry season. This places the genesis of this sophisticated knowledge squarely in the prehistoric era. Long before the rise of classical empires, we often credit with such advances. This chronological depth forces a complete reevaluation of the narrative of human progress. It suggests that our history is not a simple, upward-sloping line from primitive to advanced. Instead, it appears as a series of peaks and valleys, brilliant zeniths of specialized understanding, like the hydrological science of the Indus Valley or the Nabataeans, which then fade, often due to social collapse, environmental shift, or simply the fragmentation of knowledge. Centuries or even later, another society, facing similar pressures, might arrive at a strikingly similar solution, effectively rediscovering a lost science of stone and water. This cyclical pattern of loss and rediscovery is the true conundrum. It asks us to consider what other profound understandings of our world, etched into the landscape by our ancestors, still lie in wait, not as forgotten ruins, but as silent, functioning lessons we have yet to fully read. The immense labor of carving stone and channeling water was never a purely technical exercise. It was driven by a powerful threefold force that bound the practical, the political, and the sacred into a single, monumental purpose. The first motivation is the most immediate, the raw engine of necessity, sheer survival in unforgiving landscapes. In the deserts of Arabia or the seasonal drylands of India, a reliable water source was not a convenience. It was the absolute boundary between life and oblivion. A community that could not guarantee its water for the lean months was a community with no future. The RockCut reservoir was, therefore, the ultimate insurance policy, a buffer against the tyranny of climate. It turned precarious existence into sustained possibility, allowing agriculture, trade, and urban life to flourish where otherwise only nomads could pass through. But necessity alone does not explain the staggering scale, the artistic embellishment, or the generations-long commitment. This is where the second force enters, the force of power. In any society, controlling the essential resource is the foundation of authority. A ruler who could guarantee a steady, clean flow of water to his people held a legitimacy more potent than any army. The Nabataean kings of Petra understood this perfectly. Their hidden network of cisterns and channels was not just civic infrastructure, it was the bedrock of their political power. By mastering the desert's most elusive element, they secured the loyalty of their citizens and the envy of their rivals. The reservoir became a symbol of royal benevolence and strategic genius, a silent argument for the ruler's right to lead. To control water was to control life itself, and that is the most profound power any leader can wield. Yet even this political calculus was infused with a third, deeper dimension, the spiritual. Across cultures, water was never merely H2O, it was a sacred substance, a symbol of purity, life, and divine blessing. In India, the magnificent stepwells were frequently attached to temples, their very architecture designed as a devotional path. The act of descending the long, sculpted staircase was a metaphorical journey into the earth, a pilgrimage to the source of life, where drawing water became a ritual act of reverence. The carvings of gods and goddesses that lined the walls were not mere decoration. They were active participants in the space, sanctifying the daily chore of collection. Similarly, in Byzantine Constantinople, the great cisterns were often named after nearby basilicas, like the Basilica cistern itself. This naming convention was no accident. It deliberately blended the civic utility of water storage with the aura of the divine. The underground cathedral of columns and water mirrored the sacred spaces above, framing the empire's survival as an act under divine protection. This inseparable fusion is the final, crucial insight. We cannot view these ancient reservoirs as engineering feats. The technical knowledge of hydrology and stonework was always applied within a cultural vessel, serving gods, kings, and communities all at once. The stepwell was a place of prayer, a civic square, and a life-saving tank. Petra's cisterns were instruments of state power, economic assets, and the hidden sinews that allowed a desert capital to breathe. This multidimensional purpose is what elevated them from simple infrastructure to profound cultural statements. They tell us that for these civilizations, there was no clean divide between the practical and the profound, between survival and sanctity. The water that quenched a physical thirst was the very same water that nourished the soul and cemented the social order. In their silent, enduring presence, they challenge our modern compartmentalized world, asking us what we might be missing when we build systems that serve only one master, and forget to weave our deepest values into the very structures that sustain us. The choice to carve a reservoir from stone was never the only option on the table. To truly grasp its significance, we must place it beside its great historical rival, the built reservoir. 4 civilizations from Mesopotamia to Rome mastered the art of constructing immense water storage with masonry, piling stone upon stone, sealing joints with mortar, and creating artificial lakes behind towering dams. These built structures represent a powerful and flexible approach to water management. They could be placed almost anywhere the topography allowed, built relatively quickly with a large workforce, and scaled to immense proportions. The Roman Empire, in particular, became legendary for its audacious aqueducts and reservoirs, feats of civil engineering that shouted human dominion over the landscape. Yet for all their grandeur, built reservoirs carried inherent vulnerabilities. Their greatest weakness was their very assembly. Mortar, no matter how expertly mixed, eventually degrades. It cracks under thermal stress, erodes from constant moisture, and crumbles over centuries. A built dam or tank is only as strong as its weakest joint, requiring vigilant, perpetual maintenance to prevent catastrophic failure. Furthermore, these massive masonry structures were exceptionally vulnerable to the Earth's tremors. An earthquake could exploit a single fault line in the mortar or shift a foundational stone, causing the entire edifice to collapse in a cascade of failure. They stood upon the earth, but they were not of it. The RockCut reservoir, by stark contrast, represents a fundamentally different pact with nature. Its initial cost was staggering, an investment of labor measured in generations rather than years. But that upfront cost purchased something extraordinary: permanence. By becoming one with the bedrock, it inherited the Earth's own stability. It had no mortar joints to fail. Its walls were not assembled, they were revealed, leaving a continuous monolithic shell. This made it inherently resilient to seismic activity, the entire structure moving as a single, unified mass with the surrounding geology rather than shattering apart. Its integration went beyond mere structure. Because it was carved into water-bearing strata, it could often act as a giant well, passively replenished by the slow seep of groundwater, a symbiotic relationship a surface tank could never achieve. The maintenance shifted from constant, desperate repair of external walls to the simpler, periodic task of clearing silt from the interior. The philosophy here is profound. The builders of masonry reservoirs saw the landscape as a canvas, a site upon which to impose a human design. The RockCut engineers saw the landscape as a partner. They listened to the stone, followed its grain, and worked within its logic to unveil a pre-existing stability. One method builds a fortress for water, the other grows a sanctuary from the living earth. This choice, then, is a clear signal of priority. It speaks of a culture playing the ultimate long game, willing to sacrifice the quick triumph for the legacy that endures 1,000 years. It asks us which vision of the future we find more compelling, the brilliant flash of a built monument, or the deep, silent patience of a mountain carved to hold life. Their mastery of stone and water was not born in a vacuum, but forged in a relentless conversation with the sky. These monumental reservoirs are not examples of a universal ancient blueprint. They are hyper-specialized adaptations, each one a brilliant, localized answer to a very specific environmental question. The primary architect of their design was not a king or an engineer, but climate itself, specifically the twin pressures of aridity and the unpredictable rhythm of seasonal rain. The knowledge required to build them did not emerge from abstract theory, but from the acute, generational necessity of creating a buffer against droughts that could stretch for years, even decades. Survival depended on reading the landscape with a scientist's eye and a poet's intuition. Engineers and planners had to become intimate with microclimates, understanding how a particular mountain range created a rain shadow, leaving one valley parched while another received runoff. They calculated local evaporation rates with astonishing accuracy, knowing that in a desert, a shallow, open pool was a promise quickly broken by the sun. This dictated the very form of their creations. In the monsoon-drenched regions of India, the challenge was one of overwhelming abundance, followed by prolonged scarcity. The design of the Great Stepwells focused on capturing the fury of those intense, seasonal downpours, channeling torrential runoff into the deep. Shaded embrace of the earth where it could be protected from evaporation and meted out slowly across the dry months. The architecture was a shock absorber for the climate's violent swings. 1,000 miles to the west, in the desert heart of Petra, the equation was reversed. Here, rain was not a seasonal event to be managed, but a rare, sporadic gift, often arriving as a violent flash flood that could vanish as quickly as it appeared. The Nabataean system, therefore, was not about managing abundance, but about hunting scarcity. Their entire network of dams and channels functioned as a vast, territorial net, cast across the surrounding highlands to capture every possible drop from these fleeting, chaotic events. The knowledge was so precisely tailored to its environment that it was not easily transferable. What worked in the granite foothills of one region would be useless in the limestone plateaus of another. This was deeply localized wisdom, a product of generations watching the same clouds gather over the same mountains, learning the unique personality of their home's thirst. It was a science written in the language of local stone and local weather patterns, a testament to human ingenuity becoming one with the harsh, beautiful rhythms of a specific place. But how do we listen to these silent, subterranean stories today? Uncovering the full scope of a rock-cut water system is a detective story that unfolds across centuries, using tools that range from the humble trowel to satellites orbiting the planet. The first challenge is simply finding them. Many of these reservoirs and channels lie completely buried, their entrances lost to landslides or centuries of accumulated soil. This is where modern, non-invasive archaeology shines. Technologies like ground-penetrating radar send pulses of energy into the earth, painting a picture of hidden voids and structural anomalies without ever breaking the surface. Similarly, electrical resistivity tomography measures how easily the soil conducts electricity, revealing the distinct signature of a dry, rock-cut chamber versus the surrounding, waterlogged earth. These methods allow archaeologists to map the skeleton of a buried system, to see the ghostly outline of a cistern or a channel network before a single shovel touches the ground. From the air, another revolutionary tool has changed the game: LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. Mounted on planes or drones, LiDAR uses laser pulses to strip away dense forest canopy or scrubland vegetation, revealing the naked topography of the ground beneath. In places like the jungles surrounding ancient Maya cities or the overgrown hinterlands of Petra, LiDAR has unveiled vast, previously unknown networks of canals, terraces, and catchment basins, showing how entire landscapes were sculpted for water management on a colossal scale. These technologies provide the map, but the intimate story is told by the soil itself. Once a likely site is identified, careful, meticulous excavation begins. Here, archaeology becomes an act of slow, respectful revelation. The layers of silt inside a reservoir are read like the pages of a book. A thick layer of fine, clean sand might represent centuries of gentle, filtered water inflow. A sudden band of coarse gravel and debris could tell the story of a catastrophic flood that overwhelmed the system, or perhaps the moment its maintenance was abandoned. Archaeologists analyze samples of the unique waterproof plaster, identifying its composition, sometimes finding fingerprints of the ancient masons pressed into the material, a fleeting human touch preserved for. Perhaps the most eloquent clues are found in the stone itself. On the walls of water channels, a soft, porous rock called tufa often forms from minerals deposited by flowing water. By studying these layers of tufa, scientists can deduce the chemistry of the water that flowed there, its temperature, and even its speed. A thick, consistent layer indicates a long period of steady, mineral-rich flow. A thin or absent layer might suggest the channel was used only seasonally, or that the water was very pure. This allows researchers to virtually reconstruct the hydrological heartbeat of an ancient city, understanding not just how the system was built, but how it actually functioned across generations. Each technological advance, from radar to geochemistry, peels back another layer of time, allowing us to slowly reverse engineer the ancient thought process. We are not just finding ruins, we are recovering a lost science, one careful scan, one delicate brushstroke, and one microscopic analysis at a time. This painstaking work transforms these silent chambers from mere engineering feats into chronicles of daily life, of changing climates, and of the relentless human ingenuity that sought to make a permanent home in an impermanent world. This intricate knowledge was a living thing, passed from hand to mind not on fragile parchment, but through the most durable human connection, the master and the apprentice. In a world where written manuals were rare treasures, the true library for this engineering science existed in the memory and muscle of skilled practitioners. A young learner would not study theories of hydrology in a classroom. He would stand beside his teacher in the dust and din of the quarry, feeling the vibration of a chisel. Learning to listen to the ring of healthy stone versus the dull thud of a hidden fault. The principles of geometry needed to ensure a chamber's stability, the intuitive grasp of how water seeks its level, the understanding of which rock strata could hold a seal. All of this was transmitted through demonstration, through story, and through years of disciplined practice. This was knowledge earned by doing, a wisdom that resided in the calloused hands and watchful eyes of a guild or a family lineage. These masters held a power more valuable than gold, the power to grant a city its future. Their methods were closely guarded trade secrets, the proprietary genius that ensured their community's survival and their own elevated status. This system created an unbroken chain of practical understanding, but its strength was also its profound vulnerability. The knowledge was ephemeral, a flame passed carefully from one torch to the next. If the social order shattered, if a plague swept through, or if a master died without a worthy successor, that intricate flame could flicker and vanish in a single generation. The technology did not disappear because it was inferior, but because its human vessels were lost. This explains the haunting pattern we see across history, where a civilization's peak of hydrological sophistication is followed by a decline into simpler methods, a forgetting of the deep dialogue with the earth. Yet in the absence of living teachers, the stone itself became the silent instructor. Each new generation, tasked with maintaining the vast cisterns and channels carved by their ancestors, learned by interacting with the work. Cleaning silt from a 1,000-year-old settling tank, they would see its clever slope. Repairing a cracked inlet channel, they would understand the original mason's choice of alignment. The reservoir was both infrastructure and textbook, a permanent reference that allowed practical knowledge to be partially recovered, even rediscovered, through direct engagement. This created a continuous, tangible conversation with the past, where the questions posed by ancient engineers were answered through the ongoing labor of preservation. It was a legacy written in negative space, demanding to be read not with eyes alone, but with hands and thoughtful care. The temptation is to see these silent, enduring chambers as something beyond human, as artifacts of a forgotten superscience. Yet this romantic view, while alluring, obscures the true, more profound nature of their achievement. To call them magical or lost technologies is to do a disservice to the generations of ordinary people whose collective effort and sharp observation made them possible. There was no secret manual, no single moment of divine inspiration. These systems were built through the relentless, grinding engine of organized labor, refined through centuries of trial and error. Each crack in a plaster seal taught a lesson. Each successful season of full storage validated a design choice. This was knowledge written in the slow, patient language of practical experience. The principles they harnessed are not alien to us. They understood gravity, slope, and water pressure. They grasped the concept of sedimentation and the insulating properties of earth and stone. Their genius was not in discovering unknown laws of physics, but in applying these fundamental truths with exquisite, context-specific skill. They looked at their local mountain and understood exactly how its rock would fracture, how its slopes would channel a flood, and where to carve a chamber that would stand for. This was innovation deeply rooted in place, a brilliant adaptation to a specific environmental puzzle. It is a form of intelligence we still recognize and value, just expressed with the tools and materials of their time. Nor were these systems infallible. They existed within a dynamic world. A prolonged drought could lower the water table beyond the reach of even the deepest stepwell. A major seismic event, while often weathered better than a built structure, could still shift bedrock and crack an essential channel. Perhaps the most persistent challenge was siltation. Over decades, even the best sedimentation basins could not stop the slow, inevitable accumulation of mud and debris, gradually reducing a reservoir's capacity until a massive, costly cleaning operation was required. Sometimes, a changing climate or a shift in settlement patterns simply made the entire system obsolete, leaving it as a silent monument to a different era's needs. To view them through this realistic lens, however, does not diminish their wonder. It enhances it. By stripping away the myth of magic, we are left with a clearer, more human picture of triumph. We see communities facing monumental challenges with the tools they had, observing their world with acute care, and investing in projects whose benefits they themselves might never live to see. This was foresight and perseverance on a scale. Recognizing the constraints they worked within, the limits of their tools, the uncertainty of their climate, the sheer physical difficulty of the task, makes their success all the more staggering. It honors the true source of their power, not a vanished secret, but the enduring, adaptable ingenuity of the human mind and the collective strength of human society. Their legacy is not a mystery to be solved, but an resilience to be understood. Beneath one of the world's most contested and revered religious sites lies a hidden sea. The Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron, sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is built over a foundation not of faith alone, but of astonishing hydrological foresight. Carved directly into the soft limestone bedrock beneath its ancient stones is a colossal, bell-shaped cistern, a silent testament to the practical genius that underpinned sacred space. This is not a minor storage tank, but a monumental void. Reaching a depth of over 40 feet, its cavernous interior was engineered to hold an almost incomprehensible volume, close to 700,000 gallons of water. To stand at its excavated edge is to confront the sheer physical ambition of ancient planners, who looked beneath a place of eternal spiritual significance and saw the pressing, earthly need for permanence. The cistern's traditional attribution points to the Herodian period, around 2,000 years ago, an era famed for its colossal building projects like the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. The builders here employed that same grand vision, but turned it inward into the earth. Their challenge was multifaceted. First, they had to excavate this immense, stable cavity in limestone, a rock that is workable but can be prone to crumbling. The solution was the iconic bell shape, a narrow entrance shaft widening dramatically into a vast, rounded chamber. This form is a masterpiece of geotechnical logic. The curved walls distribute the immense weight of the overlying bedrock and the holy structures above evenly, preventing collapse. The narrow neck at the top minimized evaporation and debris entry, while the expansive belly below maximized storage capacity. It is architecture defined by negative space, engineered for perfect equilibrium between void and solid. Yet an empty cistern, no matter how perfectly carved, is merely a sculpture. The second critical layer of knowledge was hydrological integration. This underground bell did not exist in isolation. The surface of the sacred precinct itself was meticulously designed as a catchment basin. Broad, paved courtyards and strategically sloped rooftops would have channeled every precious drop of seasonal rainwater through a network of gutters and channels, funneling it directly into the cistern's mouth. This transformed the entire complex above into a giant funnel, a sacred machine for harvesting the sky. The water captured here was not merely for ritual purification, though it certainly served that purpose. It was the lifeblood for the priests, the pilgrims, and the community that maintained this eternal site. It allowed the sacred compound to function as a self-sustaining entity, capable of supporting large gatherings during festivals and withstanding periods of siege or drought. This is where the sacred-profane duality becomes palpable. Above, the focus was on the divine, on ancestry, and on prayer. Below, the focus was on survival, on soil mechanics, and on the clever capture of rain. One could not exist without the other. The spiritual significance of the site demanded its physical permanence, and that permanence was guaranteed by the hidden reservoir. Studying this single cistern is like examining a fossilized thought process. Every feature, from the angle of the walls to the smooth finish of the interior plaster, represents a micro-decision born from deep empirical knowledge. The choice of location balanced structural stability with optimal catchment. The application of a waterproof lime plaster sealant demonstrated a chemical understanding of preservation. The integration with surface architecture revealed a holistic vision of the entire site as a single, living hydrological organism. This one void, hidden in the dark, contains the entire macro-genius of the tradition in microcosm. It proves that the greatest achievements of ancient engineering are often invisible, supporting the visible world from below, ensuring that the stories told above ground could continue unbroken for. That hidden sea of water beneath a sacred site held a purpose far greater than ritual or even basic survival. It was the first link in a chain that culminated in the most fundamental act of civilization: growing food. The ultimate purpose of these vast, silent reservoirs was often agricultural sustainability, transforming stored potential into tangible, life-giving abundance. The water captured from a fleeting desert storm or a seasonal monsoon was not hoarded in the dark. It was strategically released. Channeled through meticulously engineered networks of canals and ditches that turned harsh desert margins into flourishing, productive gardens. This was the system's final, triumphant output, the conversion of engineering into nourishment. Imagine the water's journey, flowing from the cool, dark heart of a mountain cistern out through a rock-cut sluice gate and into a main irrigation channel. From there, it would branch like veins into smaller and smaller arteries, each one carefully graded to maintain a gentle, gravity-fed flow. This precious resource would then be directed to terraced fields carved into hillsides, to shady palm groves, and to carefully tended vineyards. What was once a barren landscape became a managed ecosystem, an artificial oasis sustained by the memory of past rains. The scale of this transformation is breathtaking. In places like the Negev Desert, archaeological evidence reveals how Nabataean and later Byzantine farmers used water from such systems to cultivate wheat, olives, and grapes in what appeared to be an utterly inhospitable environment. They didn't just grow enough to scrape by, they often achieved a surplus, enabling trade, supporting specialized crafts, and fueling the growth of urban centers. This created a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle, a positive feedback loop of civilization. Reliable water from the reservoir allowed for stable, productive agriculture, which supported a larger, settled population. That larger population, in turn, provided the necessary labor force to maintain, clean, and even expand the intricate water system. The knowledge of the engineers, therefore, had to expand beyond the reservoir walls into the science of agricultural hydraulics. This was a deep, practical understanding of how different crops consumed water, of how to schedule irrigation to maximize growth while conserving the resource, and of how to manage the ever-present threat of soil salinity, where mineral buildup from evaporated irrigation water could slowly poison the land. They learned to read the soil's thirst as keenly as they read the stone's grain. The RockCut reservoir, then, was never an end in itself. It was the beating heart of an entire, integrated ecological system. It provided the steady, reliable pulse that allowed every other organ of the society to function, from the farmer's field to the merchant's stall. This proves a profound historical truth that in the world's most challenging environments, advanced water management was not a secondary luxury. It was the foundational, non-negotiable technology upon which civilization itself was built. The grand temples and palaces we so often admire were merely the flowering branches, but the root of it all, the deep, hidden source of their vitality, was always the silent, patient water held in stone. The water that sustained the body was also meant to nourish the spirit. This is where the ancient vision transcends mere engineering and enters the realm of profound cultural expression. These reservoirs were rarely hidden away as shameful, purely utilitarian eyesores. The knowledge of their builders extended seamlessly into aesthetics and architectural integration, declaring that the structures which guaranteed life were also worthy of beauty. Nowhere is this fusion more breathtakingly evident than in the stepwells of the Indian subcontinent. These were not dark holes in the ground, but luminous, inverted palaces. Their walls became canvases for elaborate carvings depicting deities, mythological scenes, and geometric patterns. Pillared pavilions and shaded galleries were carved directly into the descent, creating cool, ornate spaces for gathering, conversation, and ritual. A stepwell was not just a place to collect water, it was a vibrant community landmark, a destination in itself. The act of drawing water was framed by artistry, transforming a daily chore into a sensory and spiritual experience. This principle of integration was universal, even in structures less ornate. Far to the west, in the cavernous cisterns beneath Constantinople, the purely functional was again elevated. The Basilica cistern, with its forest of reclaimed marble columns and soaring vaulted ceilings, directly echoed the grandeur of the basilicas and public forums above ground. Walking through that dark, reflective space felt like moving through a submerged cathedral. The columns were not structurally necessary to hold up the bedrock ceiling. Their purpose was psychological and symbolic. They communicated stability, order, and the sacred importance of the resource they surrounded. This conscious blending of form and function sends a powerful message across centuries. It reveals a societal value judgment held by the engineers, the artisans, and the patrons who funded these projects. Water security was never viewed as just a technical project to be completed and forgotten. It was seen as a fundamental cultural achievement, a triumph of collective will and intelligence that deserved to be celebrated, and investing in ornamentation was a statement of civic pride, a way of honoring the source of life itself. It elevated the practical machinery of survival into the realm of public art, making the infrastructure a central, cherished part of the community's identity. When you descend the steps of, surrounded by thousands of symmetrically carved stones, you are not visiting a water tank. You are walking through a monument to a civilization's gratitude, a stone hymn to the element that made their world possible. This deep-seated desire to beautify the essential asks us a quiet question about our own modern landscapes. We hide our vital water infrastructure behind fences, in concrete treatment plants far from city centers. What does it mean that we have, in many ways, separated the beauty of our public spaces from the practical systems that keep those spaces alive? The ancient builders saw no such division. For them, the reservoir was the heart, and they saw no reason not to adorn it. Yet the silence that now fills these chambers is itself a profound part of their story. For all their brilliance, these vast hydraulic networks did not hum with activity forever. Across continents and climates, the flow of life-giving water through these stone veins eventually slowed, then stopped altogether. The reasons for this great quieting are of the forces that reshape human history, a reminder that no adaptation, no matter how sophisticated, exists in a vacuum. A primary, relentless pressure was the slow march of climate. Regions that were already arid could become even drier over centuries. With rainfall patterns shifting so profoundly that even the most efficient catchment systems could no longer capture enough to fill their monumental tanks. Conversely, a region might grow wetter, its once precious reservoirs becoming redundant as new springs emerged, or as consistent rains made such intensive storage less critical. The very ground could turn against the design. Tectonic activity, the slow groan of continents, could silently shift an entire water table, causing a spring that fed a cistern for 1,000 years to simply migrate elsewhere, leaving its stone partner forever empty. Or a tremor could fracture a critical, hidden feeder channel deep within the bedrock, a flaw impossible to detect and too costly to repair. Social and political stability was the other indispensable pillar. The intricate dance of cleaning silt, repairing plaster, and clearing channels required a coordinated, sustained effort across generations. It demanded a social contract, a shared understanding that this work was essential for all. When empires fragmented, when centralized authority collapsed into local conflict, or when populations migrated under duress, that contract shattered. The specialized knowledge of the water masters was lost, and the relentless, patient work of maintenance ceased. Without that care, the system's decline was inevitable. Silt would slowly choke the chambers, cracks would go unsealed, and invading tree roots would patiently dismantle the stonework. Sometimes the cause was not collapse, but conquest, the introduction of a new technology that rendered the old ways obsolete. The spread of deeper, drilled well technology, for instance, offered a more direct, if less communal, point source solution that could bypass the need for massive surface catchment and storage. Perhaps the most poignant lesson comes from Petra itself. The city's genius was not just in capturing water, but in its position along lucrative trade routes. When those routes shifted, when sea travel or other land passages became preferred, the economic engine that powered Petra's society and funded its hydrological marvels simply sputtered out. The population dwindled. The labor force needed to maintain the hundreds of cisterns and miles of channels was no longer there. The brilliant system did not fail catastrophically, it was simply no longer sustainable. The water might still have been there, trapped in the cliffs, but the society required to manage it was gone. This is the ultimate insight. These reservoirs were not miracles. They were expressions of a delicate, active balance between human ingenuity and a specific environmental and social context. When that context changed too dramatically, the knowledge, though etched in stone, became a relic. Their silent, enduring forms are therefore not just monuments to what we achieved, but sobering lessons in the vulnerability of even our most robust creations. They ask us what indispensable systems we maintain today, and what unseen pillars of stability they truly rest upon. The silence of these abandoned reservoirs was broken by a new kind of listener. Centuries after the last caretakers departed, the echoes of their work were heard again, not by those who understood its original purpose, but by engineers and archaeologists from a different world, often arriving under the banner of colonial administration or scientific expedition. Stumbling upon the vast, empty cistern of Petra or the geometric perfection of a buried stepwell, they experienced a shock of recognition. Here was hydrological thinking of a scale and sophistication that their assumptions about ancient capability. Their awe was frequently tinged with practical ambition, seeing in these stone voids a potential solution to modern water shortages in arid regions. In some remarkable instances, this led to direct revival. A number of India's great stepwells, like the magnificent Rani Vav, were meticulously excavated of centuries of silt, their structural integrity assessed and reinforced, and their channels cleared. For a time, they once again fulfilled their ancient role, collecting monsoon rains and providing water for local communities, a living testament to a design so sound it could awaken after a long slumber. Yet the world these systems re-enter is fundamentally changed. The greatest threat to their survival today is no longer social collapse, but the invisible crisis of groundwater depletion. Modern, deep-bore wells, powered by fossil fuels, can extract water from aquifers far faster than natural processes can replenish them. As the water table plummets, it falls far below the reach of even the deepest ancient stepwell, leaving its beautifully carved staircase descending into a permanent, dusty dryness. Urban sprawl presents another relentless pressure. The catchment basins that once fed these reservoirs are now paved over with concrete and asphalt, diverting the precious runoff into storm drains instead of stone channels. Pollution from industry and agriculture seeps into the soil, contaminating the very groundwater that might still seep into these ancient tanks, rendering the water they could hold unsafe. The conservation battle is therefore fought on multiple fronts, a race against both neglect and the unintended consequences of our own modern hydrology. The mission has now decisively shifted from utilitarian revival to cultural preservation. Global efforts, led by organizations like UNESCO and dedicated local groups, focus on documenting these sites with laser scans and three-dimensional modeling, creating digital archives of their precise geometry. Structural engineers carefully analyze cracks and instability, installing subtle reinforcements that protect the ancient fabric without obscuring it. The goal is rarely to restore them as primary water sources for a city, but to safeguard them as monuments of human ingenuity. In this new chapter, they serve as powerful educational tools. To walk down into a cleaned and stabilized stepwell is to take a physical journey through time, to feel the cool air rise from the depths, and to witness firsthand the intersection of art, community, and survival science. It makes abstract concepts of sustainability and resilience viscerally real. This creates a profound and poignant loop. Contemporary engineers and archaeologists now work tirelessly to preserve the very knowledge they are still striving to fully comprehend. They use satellite imagery to trace lost feeder channels and chemical analysis to reverse engineer ancient waterproof plasters, all in an effort to stabilize structures whose original builders left no written manuals. In doing so, they are not just saving stones from crumbling, they are actively rebuilding that bridge across, piecing together the silent language of water and stone. Each conserved site becomes a dialogue, a place where the questions posed by ancient minds meet the tools and curiosity of the modern world, ensuring that this deep time of water wisdom is not lost again to the silence. The sophistication etched into these stone chambers forces a crucial distinction, one between the kind of knowledge we often celebrate today and the kind that truly built them. This was not the product of formal, theoretical science as we understand it. The master carvers of Petra or the engineers of almost certainly had no textbooks on fluid dynamics, no lectures on particulate sedimentation. They did not calculate water pressure with mathematical formulas. Yet, to say they lacked understanding would be a profound error. They possessed something perhaps more powerful for their specific challenge, a deep, empirical, and intuitive mastery of these very principles, earned not in a classroom, but in the dust and water of the real world. Their intelligence was phenomenological, a word that simply means it grew from direct, repeated observation of phenomena, of how water actually behaved in their specific landscape. They learned by watching, by doing, and by remembering what worked and what failed, lessons that were then passed down through generations of practiced hands. They knew from relentless experience that water always seeks the lowest point, that gravity was a constant, reliable force. They did not need Newton's equations to design a channel with the perfect, gentle slope to maintain flow without erosion. They discovered through trial and error that if water entered a wide, calm basin, the silt would settle out, leaving clearer water to proceed. They understood hydraulic pressure intuitively, that water confined in a pipe from a high source would push itself upward with surprising force, allowing them to deliver it to elevated terraces or second-story fountains. This knowledge was embedded in the muscle memory of the craftsman shaping a channel's gradient, in the eye of the planner surveying a hillside's natural drainage. It was a science of the specific, a dialogue with the local rock, the local rain patterns, and the local needs. This path to sophistication reveals a different kind of genius, one that is deeply contextual and relentlessly practical. It is the intelligence of the gardener who knows exactly when to water not by reading a manual, but by feeling the soil and knowing the sun's path across their particular plot. The builders solved the same critical problem, survival through water security, in the same location, for century after century. Each generation refined the solution, deepening the collective know-how, making micro-adjustments that responded to a crack in the plaster or a change in seasonal flow. This long-term refinement in one place yielded a specialized expertise that was incredibly robust, but also uniquely tied to that place. It was a wisdom that could not be easily extracted and written down in a universal textbook, because so much of it was in the feel of the local stone and the rhythm of the local sky. Recognizing this does not diminish their legacy, it fundamentally reframes it. It moves us away from the anachronistic search for lost equations or secret blueprints, and toward a profound respect for applied, collective learning. Their achievement stands as a monumental testament to what human communities can accomplish through careful observation, patient experimentation, and the relentless, hands-on work of making an idea function in the real world. It proves that a society can reach breathtaking heights of technological and environmental adaptation without a single formal research institute, guided instead by the accumulated practical wisdom of countless individuals, all focused on a singular, vital goal. This invites a quiet reflection on our own age of specialization, where theoretical knowledge and practical application can sometimes exist in separate worlds. What might we learn from these ancient integrators, for whom the proof of knowledge was not a published paper, but a reservoir that never ran dry that deep? Intuitive dialogue with the earth did not vanish when the last stone was set. The philosophy of using the planet's own body as a shield for water proved too powerful, too logical, to ever be completely forgotten. Its influence seeped into later traditions, not as a direct, unbroken line of instruction, but as a recurring whisper in humanity's long conversation about survival. The core idea that permanence and security could be carved from the living landscape became a kind of hydrological wisdom that different cultures rediscovered or adapted for their own needs. We see its subtle echo in the vast underground cisterns of the Roman world. While Roman engineers were masters of building upward with concrete and brick, creating monumental aqueducts and raised reservoirs, they also understood the inherent advantage of bedrock. In places where the geology was favorable, they eagerly adopted the RockCut principle, carving immense cisterns directly into hillsides or stable strata to supplement their built networks. These subterranean chambers offered the same timeless benefit, security from evaporation and siege, proving that the value of earth-sheltered storage transcended any single civilization's techniques. This philosophy found another profound expression in the arid heartlands of the Islamic world, where water management became both a science and an art. Here, the ancient technology of the Qanat, a gently sloping underground tunnel that taps a distant aquifer, represents a brilliant extension of the same core logic. It does not store water in a single cavern, but instead creates a hidden, protected river, guiding it from source to settlement entirely within the earth, safe from the desert sun. Alongside this, the tradition of an underground cool water storage chamber often built beneath homes, continued the practice of using the ground's thermal mass to preserve and protect a vital resource. While it is difficult to trace a direct lineage from the cisterns of Petra to the Qanats of Persia, they are clearly part of the same intellectual family. They all spring from a foundational belief that the most reliable water system is one that is integrated with and protected by the geology itself. It is a school of thought that prioritizes harmony with subterranean forces over domination of the surface. This recurring pattern reveals something fundamental about human adaptation. The RockCut reservoir and its conceptual descendants represent more than just a set of construction techniques. They embody a specific philosophy of resilience. It is a mindset that chooses the arduous, long-term investment over the quick fix, that values sustainability and security over visible monumentality. This philosophy does not travel in rulebooks. It resurfaces in human decision-making whenever communities face the stark reality of long-term scarcity. It appears whenever planners ask not just how to get water today, but how to guarantee it for theirs. The choice to carve into bedrock, to dig a Qanat for miles, or to vault a cistern deep beneath a city is ultimately a vote for patience and foresight. It is a declaration that some challenges are so existential that the only worthy solution is one meant to last as long as the mountains themselves. In our modern era of rapidly built infrastructure and pressing environmental shifts, this ancient whisper asks us a quiet, persistent question. When we turn on the tap, what kind of future have we built into the pipes? The story of these reservoirs is not written in a single language, but in a layered dialect of stone, water, and human intent. To translate it fully demands a rare collaboration, a meeting of modern minds where the boundaries between disciplines dissolve. No single expert holds the master key. Instead, unlocking the complete narrative requires a true interdisciplinary fusion, a consortium of perspectives that together perform a kind of intellectual archaeology. Each specialist brings a different lens to the same silent space, and only when their findings converge does the ancient logic begin to speak clearly. A geologist enters the chamber not just to admire the carving, but to read the rock itself. They identify the specific type of stone, its density, its porosity, and its natural fracture lines. This tells a story of choice. Why did the builders select this particular hillside, this specific stratum of bedrock? The answer lies in the stone's personality, a stable, impermeable limestone perhaps, or a granite that could be trusted to hold a vast, unsupported void. The geologist assesses the long-term stability of the excavation, understanding how the chamber has withstood of seismic whispers and the slow, relentless pressure of the earth. Their work answers the fundamental question of why the structure is still standing. Meanwhile, the archaeologist works as a detective of context. They sift through the layers of silt on the floor, searching for fragments of pottery, a lost tool, or a coin that might offer a clue to when the reservoir was in active use. They map the precise relationship of the cistern to surrounding buildings and streets, piecing together how it fit into the daily rhythm of the ancient city. Their findings help build a timeline, a sequence of construction, use, modification, and eventual abandonment. But the story of how the system functioned, its day-to-day performance, often requires the mind of a modern hydraulic engineer. Using the precise dimensions provided by archaeological surveys, they can create sophisticated computer models. They simulate how water would have flowed through the inlet channels, calculating the velocity and pressure. They model the reservoir's storage efficiency, its rate of filling during a storm, and how long its contents might last a population of a certain size under siege conditions. This modern analysis can reveal hidden genius, showing how an apparently simple slope in a channel was, in fact, a perfectly calibrated design to minimize turbulence and sediment carryover. Perhaps the most elegant examples of this synthesis come from the subtlest clues. Consider the mineral deposits, those thin, layered crusts that form on the walls of water channels over centuries. To the untrained eye, they are just discoloration, but to a geochemist, they are a historical archive. By analyzing the chemical composition of these deposits, scientists can deduce the mineral content and pH of the water that flowed there for generations. They can infer whether the water came from a limestone aquifer, making it hard and mineral-rich, or from a surface runoff, and they can even detect periods of stagnation or changes in the source. This one piece of data, born from geology and decoded by chemistry, tells a vivid story about ancient water quality and system use. This collaborative approach is not just a modern preference, it is an essential form of respect. It recognizes that the original builders were themselves the ultimate interdisciplinary practitioners. The master architect of a Nabataean cistern was, by necessity, a practical geologist who could read the cliff face. They were a surveyor who could trace a watercourse over miles of rugged terrain. They were a project manager who could coordinate the labor of hundreds. And they were a materials scientist who perfected a waterproof plaster. They synthesized fields of knowledge that we have since separated into distinct academic departments. To truly understand them, we cannot approach their work with a fragmented, specialized gaze. We must attempt to emulate their holistic vision, to recombine the pieces of geology, archaeology, engineering, and even chemistry that they held seamlessly in one mind. In doing so, we do more than just solve a technical puzzle. We begin a conversation across time with some of history's most insightful and resilient thinkers. This symbolic fusion was not merely poetic observation, it was a core driver of the work itself. To carve a reservoir was to perform a kind of alchemy, transforming the intangible into the eternal. Water represented the ultimate paradox, life-giving yet wildly unpredictable, a source of both fertility and catastrophic flood. It was chaos in its liquid form. Stone, by contrast, was the embodiment of order, permanence, and stability. By deliberately imprisoning the chaotic within the permanent, ancient societies performed a powerful metaphysical act. They were not just building infrastructure, they were enacting a cosmology, making a philosophical statement about humanity's role in the universe. This was the taming of nature's most mercurial force, a declaration that through collective will and ingenuity, the fleeting could be made to last, and uncertainty could be transformed into security. The reservoir became a physical metaphor for civilization itself, the imposition of human order upon the natural world's beautiful, dangerous randomness. This symbolic layer provided the spiritual fuel for a project spanning generations. It is one thing to ask a community to dig a hole for water. It is something entirely different to invite them to participate in a ritual of cosmic significance, to help capture the essence of life itself within the bones of the earth. The labor then transcended drudgery, becoming a sacred duty, a contribution to a legacy that literally held the future within its stone walls. We see this ideology reflected in the very language of these sites. In Sanskrit, the stepwell is often called a vav, or terms imbued with reverence, not just utility. Their intricate carvings frequently depict nagas, serpent deities associated with water and fertility, guardians of the precious element now held in trust. The descent into the stepwell mirrored a descent into the primordial waters of creation, a return to the source. Every visit to draw water reaffirmed this symbolic contract between the community and the elemental forces that sustained it. This perspective forces us to reconsider the nature of ancient innovation. For these builders, the line between engineering and ritual was blurred, perhaps non-existent. The precision of the stonework was a form of devotion. The correct angle of a channel was both a practical necessity and an act of cosmological alignment. Success was measured not only in gallons stored, but in harmony achieved. The reservoir stood as a permanent ideological statement, a declaration that humanity was not a passive victim of nature's whims, but an active participant capable of creating pockets of enduring order within the vast, unpredictable flow of the world. This deep-seated belief that practical work could carry profound meaning may be the most distant shore of their legacy from our modern mindset. We have largely separated our vital systems from our symbolic lives, outsourcing meaning to other spheres. Yet in the cool, echoing silence of a rock-cut cistern, the two are forever fused, inviting us to wonder what we might build if we believed our most practical labors could also be our most sacred. So could we build one today, not with bulldozers and dynamite, but as the ancients did, using only fire, water, and hand tools? This is more than a theoretical puzzle, it's a window into the true nature of their achievement. On the surface, the answer seems straightforward. Modern engineering possesses the physical capability, the sheer muscle, to carve a mountain. We could assemble a workforce, recreate bronze chisels and iron picks, and employ the fire-setting technique. The excavation itself, while brutally laborious, is conceptually simple to replicate. We could dig the hole, but that is where our modern confidence would likely meet its first, profound stumbling block. The real challenge lies not in the act of carving, but in the momentous decisions that must be made before the first chisel strikes stone. Where precisely do you carve? Which cliff face, which specific stratum of bedrock, offers the perfect combination of stability, impermeability, and strategic placement within the watershed? Without modern geological surveys, core samples, and satellite topography, this choice becomes a high-stakes gamble. The ancient masters made this choice not with instruments, but with an eye trained by generations of watching how water moved across that particular landscape, and hands that had learned the feel of its stone. They could read the mountain's personality in a way we have largely forgotten. Then comes the hydrological sourcing. Let's say you successfully carved a magnificent, bell-shaped cistern. It is a masterpiece of negative space. Now you must fill it. You need to design a catchment system, a network of channels and diversion dams that will capture enough seasonal runoff to make this decades-long project worthwhile. Without aerial surveys and computer models of rainfall patterns, you must predict where the water will flow during a storm that might happen only once a year. A miscalculation of a few degrees in the slope of your main feeder channel, and the water might bypass your reservoir entirely, rendering it a beautiful, dry tomb. You might over-engineer, building channels that are too large and prone to erosion, or too small and easily clogged. You might misjudge the sedimentation rate, designing a settling tank that fills with silt in a single season. This thought experiment reveals the core truth. Their knowledge was not merely technical, a list of steps for digging. It was deeply ecological and contextual. It was the wisdom of where, when, and why. Where to intercept the water's secret path, when to anticipate the climate's rhythms, why this specific location held the key to a community's 100-year future. This was a literacy written in the language of local clouds and local stone, a fluency earned through a long, intimate, and unbroken conversation with a single place. We have advanced tremendously in our understanding of universal principles, the physics of fluid dynamics, the chemistry of materials. Our knowledge is broad, powerful, and portable. But in gaining that breadth, we have in many ways sacrificed a certain depth of localized environmental intimacy. We can build a dam anywhere, but could we listen to a desert wadi and know exactly where to place a single, simple stone diversion to harvest its entire bounty? The experiment humbles our modern perspective. It suggests that the ancient builder's greatest tool was not the chisel in his hand, but the accumulated memory in his community, a living library of landscape knowledge that we, for all our technology, would struggle to reconstruct. Their legacy, therefore, is not just a challenge to our machinery, but to our very way of knowing a place. The silent void of a finished reservoir tells only half the economic story. Before the first chisel could bite into stone, an entire civilization had to make a series of staggering calculations, not of geometry, but of grain and labor. The decision to carve a mountain was, Fundamentally, a decision to feed thousands of mouths for years without any immediate return. This was the ultimate long-term investment, and its feasibility rested upon a bedrock of agricultural surplus. A society could only divert a significant portion of its able-bodied population away from farming, the direct production of food. If the farms themselves were already producing more than what the farmers needed to survive. This surplus grain became the fuel for the project, the calories that powered the arms swinging hammers and hauling baskets of rubble. It created a specialized, non-agricultural workforce, whether they were conscripted laborers fulfilling a civic duty, skilled artisans earning a wage, or individuals in a state of servitude. The very existence of this workforce is a clear economic signal. It means someone, somewhere, was managing a vast, complex system of resource storage and distribution, moving food from silos in fertile valleys to remote cliffside work camps, day after day. For years on end, beyond feeding people, the project demanded a sophisticated material economy. Consider the tools. Every worker needed a durable metal chisel or pick, which meant mining ore, smelting it, and forging the implements in quantity. The broken rock had to be removed, requiring thousands of sturdy baskets, ropes, and likely wooden sledges or carts. This implies not just craft specialists like blacksmiths and basket weavers, but entire supply chains. Ore had to travel from mine to smelter, charcoal from forest to furnace, and finished tools from workshop to the ever-advancing rock face. The organizational hierarchy needed to manage this flow was as intricate as the reservoir's own channels. There had to be overseers who could translate an architect's vision into daily quarrying targets, foremen who allocated tools and tasks, and quartermasters who ensured the supply trains never faltered. This was a logistical ballet performed without computers or radios, relying on written records, messengers, and deeply ingrained systems of command. This level of coordination points unmistakably towards centralized authority. A project of this scale and duration is almost impossible to achieve through purely voluntary, communal effort. It required a ruling power, a king, a priesthood, a civic council, with the ability to marshal a society's collective wealth and labor toward a single, monumental public good. This authority had to command not just obedience, but also long-term planning horizons that stretched far beyond a single harvest or a single ruler's. The planners had to believe so firmly in the future necessity of this reservoir that they were willing to mortgage the present, committing resources that could have been used for immediate pleasures or military expansion. This represents a profound form of economic foresight. They were investing social capital in infrastructure that might not see full use for a generation, betting that the stability it provided would pay dividends for centuries to come. The economic knowledge embedded in such an endeavor was, in its own right, a form of advanced engineering. It was the engineering of society itself. Managing the logistics of feeding, housing, and tooling a massive workforce is a problem of distribution and efficiency. Calculating how much grain to store, how many blacksmiths to employ, and how to pace the excavation to maintain morale and productivity required a deep, practical understanding of human and material systems. The reservoir, therefore, is more than a feat of hydrology. It is a fossilized imprint of a complex economy in motion. It stands as the ultimate signifier of a society that had moved beyond mere subsistence, achieving a level of surplus, specialization, and centralized coordination that allowed it to literally reshape its destiny. one carved stone at a time. The water it later held was life, but the economy that built it was the promise of a future. This enduring legacy forces us to confront a single, pivotal question. What does it truly mean to be advanced? By the yardstick of our digital age, one of microchips and instant global communication, these ancient engineers were undeniably primitive. They had no electricity, no internal combustion, no silicon. Yet, if we shift our gaze to a different metric, one of achieving profound, long-term sustainability and resilience within strict ecological limits, a startling reversal occurs. In that light, they appear not as primitive, but as masters of a sophisticated, appropriate technology. Their advancement was not measured in raw power or transformative scale, but in perfect appropriateness. Every choice, from the fire-setting technique to the bell-shaped chamber, was exquisitely suited to its material, energy, and environmental constraints. They worked with the stone, not against it. They harnessed gravity, not fossil fuels. They designed for the specific personality of their local rainfall, not for a generic, global standard. This created systems that functioned and endured for centuries on nothing but sunlight, rainwater, and human stewardship. There were no external energy inputs, no complex supply chains for replacement parts. The system was the landscape, and it was maintained by the society it sustained. This presents a direct and humbling challenge to our modern, often extractive, definition of progress. We celebrate technologies that allow us to dominate and reshape environments at an unprecedented pace, to pull resources from deep within the earth and scatter them across the globe. Our metric for advancement is frequently one of acceleration and control. Theirs was a metric of harmony and duration. They asked not how much they could change their world, but how seamlessly they could integrate with its existing rhythms to guarantee survival for 100 generations. This is not a call to abandon modernity, but an invitation to expand our understanding of sophistication. Their legacy suggests that the highest form of technological intelligence might be contextual wisdom, the deep knowledge of how to thrive within a place's natural boundaries. It asks us to consider a new, or perhaps very old, benchmark for progress. True advancement may not lie in our ability to overcome natural limits through sheer force, but in our capacity to design systems so intelligent, so perfectly adapted, that they turn those very limits into the foundations of permanence. What would our world look like if we measured our own progress not by the height of our towers, but by the enduring health of the watersheds that support them, the sheer concentration of human life within ancient city walls presented a hydrological puzzle of immense complexity. How do you quench the thirst of 20,000 souls packed into stone houses, bustling markets, and crowded temples, all drawing from the same limited source? In urban giants like Constantinople or the cliff-carved metropolis of Petra, the RockCut reservoir evolved beyond a simple storage tank. It became the critical node in a sophisticated, decentralized network, a system designed to solve the unique pressures of urban density. This was not just about having water, it was about guaranteeing its delivery to every quarter, every day, under the constant threat of siege or supply failure. The solution was a radical shift in thinking, from a single, vulnerable source to a resilient, distributed grid. Instead of one massive central reservoir, engineers carved a constellation of cisterns throughout the urban fabric. Some were vast public structures like the Basilica Cistern, while others were smaller neighborhood tanks or even private cellar vaults. This network functioned as a hydraulic buffer, smoothing out the irregularities of supply. If an aqueduct was damaged for repair, or if a seasonal source slowed, the distributed cisterns would release their stored reserves, preventing any single district from going dry. It was a lesson in redundancy, ensuring the city's heartbeat continued even if one artery was cut. This urban water grid demanded a new tier of engineering knowledge, a science of city-scale hydraulics. Planners had to become demographers and statisticians, calculating the per-water needs of a population not just for drinking, but for cooking, sanitation, industry, and public baths. They then had to design a distribution system that could meet this demand equitably. This involved understanding and manipulating water pressure with remarkable precision. To deliver water to neighborhoods built on the city's higher hills, like those in Petra clinging to cliff faces, engineers used the principle of the communicating vessel. They would often place a primary cistern at the highest feasible point, carved into the bedrock of a mountain peak. The water, seeking its level, could then flow down through sealed pipes with enough natural pressure to reach the upper stories of homes and public fountains across the lower city. It was gravity-powered urban plumbing engineered centuries before the modern pump. Perhaps the most critical knowledge was preventative, guarding against the invisible threat that density breeds: contamination. In a crowded city, the line between a clean water source and a waste channel is perilously thin. Engineers demonstrated a profound grasp of hydrologic hygiene. They carefully separated inlet and outlet channels to prevent. They used sedimentation tanks not just at the main catchment, but sometimes at neighborhood cistern inlets, providing multiple stages of filtration. The waterproof plaster lining the cisterns served as a barrier, preventing groundwater seepage from polluted soils from tainting the stored supply. In Constantinople, the famous aqueducts brought water from pristine forested highlands far from the urban sprawl, a deliberate choice to avoid the polluted watersheds closer to the city. This holistic approach reveals an early form of integrated urban planning, where the layout of streets, the placement of neighborhoods, and the flow of water were all part of a single, coherent design. The city's strength was judged not merely by the height of its battlements, but by the reliability and purity of the water flowing silently beneath the feet of its citizens. This hydrological foundation meant that a siege was not just a test of military courage, but a sustained examination of civic foresight, a battle fought and won in the dark. Cool silence of stone, reservoirs long before the first enemy arrow was fired. These quiet marks of upkeep are the system's true pulse. Look beyond the grand, sweeping staircase or the cavernous chamber, and focus instead on the stone itself. On the inner wall of a water channel, you might find a series of faint, parallel scratches, worn smooth at the edges. These are not decorative. They are the scars left by generations of workers dragging tools along the stone to scrape away accumulated silt, a ritual performed season after season to keep the lifeblood flowing. In another spot, a patch of plaster looks slightly different in color and texture, a repair made centuries after the original lining was applied. A section of pipe might be held together with a clumsy but effective clamp, a fix made in haste during a drought. These are the fingerprints of the caretakers, the unsung guardians whose daily, unglamorous work made the monumental engineering possible. This evidence reveals a critical truth: the system was never truly finished. Its completion was not a moment, but a process, a covenant with the future that demanded constant renewal. The initial vision carved the stone, but the ongoing labor of maintenance wrote the story of its use. This work required more than just strong backs. It demanded a deep, continuous, and institutional memory. Someone, somewhere, had to hold the knowledge of why this specific channel turned at that precise angle, of where the weak points in the plaster were likely to form, of how much silt could be allowed to accumulate before the flow was critically impeded. This was operational knowledge, the living manual that existed not on parchment, but in the shared understanding of a guild, a family of water masters, or a civic department dedicated to the public good. They were the keepers of the map, the ones who remembered the original intent behind every carved groove. Preserving this knowledge across the chasms of time, through wars, changes in leadership, and shifting cultural priorities, is an achievement that rivals the engineering itself. It speaks to a societal commitment to stewardship that transcended any single ruler or generation. It was a quiet, collective decision to honor a contract with the future, a promise that the lifeline carved by their ancestors would not be broken by their neglect. The grand opening of a reservoir was a celebration, but the true measure of a civilization's wisdom was written in the routine, uncelebrated act of clearing the next basket of mud from the channel. Ensuring the water would run clear for the children not yet born. The stone and water were never just materials, they were characters in a story. Around every vital stepwell and silent cistern, mythology wove its roots, transforming engineering marvels into living legends. These were not just places to draw water, they were realms inhabited by gods, spirits, and ancestral guardians. The magnificent stepwell of Rani Vav in India is not merely attributed to a queen, but to her devotion, a tale that sanctifies its every step. In countless villages, a local well might be said to have been revealed by the hoofstrike of a sage's cow or commanded into existence by the prayers of a saint. These were creation myths that gave the structure a divine origin, making it not a civic project, but a sacred gift. This narrative layer served a profound and practical purpose. It encoded the essential rules for use and protection into a form far more durable than any posted decree, the human memory for a good story. A legend about a serpent deity, or Naga, dwelling in the reservoir's depths was not merely fantasy, it was a powerful ecological warning. To pollute the water was to insult the guardian spirit, inviting a curse upon the entire community. This transformed a practical concern about waterborne illness into a tangible, supernatural deterrent that everyone, from elder to child, could understand and respect. The knowledge of maintenance, of seasonal cleaning rituals, and of equitable sharing was thus embedded not only in the technical guilds of masons, but in the songs, proverbs, and bedtime stories of the wider culture. A folk tale about a drought that ended only when a forgotten channel was cleared by a humble farmer reinforced the importance of upkeep through parable. The system's physical robustness was secured by stone, but its social sustainability across generations was often guaranteed by the myths that surrounded it. The folklore provided the moral and spiritual framework that encouraged collective stewardship. It taught that the resource was not owned, but held in trust, watched over by forces greater than any individual. This fusion reveals a sophisticated form of social engineering, where modern societies might rely on legal codes and municipal inspectors. These cultures leveraged the deep-seated human instinct for narrative. They wrapped the hard logic of hydraulic survival in the compelling cloak of mystery and meaning. The engineering ensured the water would not leak from the cistern, but the mythology ensured the community would not leak away from its responsibility. The silent, dark water was never truly empty. It was always full of stories, and those stories were what kept the water itself alive for centuries. The silent, enduring wisdom of these stone chambers speaks directly to our most pressing modern crisis. As climate change intensifies, bringing deeper droughts, erratic rainfall, and widespread water scarcity, the ancient approach offers a startlingly relevant counterpoint to our current, often fragile, systems. Our modern water infrastructure is a marvel of centralized power, relying on massive dams, sprawling aqueducts, and energy-intensive treatment plants that move water across continents. Yet this very scale creates profound vulnerability. A single point of failure, a breached dam or a poisoned main, can cripple an entire region. The ancient model presents a radical alternative, a philosophy of decentralized resilience. Instead of one colossal reservoir, they built many, scattering them throughout the landscape and beneath their cities. This distributed network could not be taken out by a single disaster. It ensured that if one cistern failed, others held the reserve. In an era of increasing climate volatility, this principle of local, redundant storage is not a step backward, but a strategic imperative for community survival. Beyond structure, their methods achieved remarkable efficiency through simple, passive design. They mastered evaporation control not with electric chillers, but by burying their water deep within the earth, using the planet's own thermal mass as a natural refrigerator. They purified water not with chemical plants, but through gravity-fed sedimentation and the natural sanitizing properties of lime plaster. These were low-energy, high-intelligence solutions that turned environmental constraints into advantages. Their entire philosophy was built on a foundation of working within local limits. They did not dream of diverting distant rivers through impossible canals. They became experts at harvesting exactly what their immediate environment provided. Whether it was a fleeting desert flash flood or the slow seep of a mountain aquifer, this hyperlocal focus created systems that were perfectly adapted and therefore inherently sustainable, requiring no external energy beyond human care to function for centuries. We cannot and should not abandon our modern advancements to literally carve new cisterns with hand tools, but we can and must adopt the underlying principles that made those ancient systems so enduring. This means embracing integrated landscape management, seeing a watershed as a single, interconnected system from mountaintop to aquifer, and designing our cities and farms to work with those natural flows. Not against them. It demands a return to long-term infrastructure thinking, investing in projects meant to last for 100 years, not just a decade, valuing resilience over short-term cost savings. Most critically, it requires designing systems that are inherently sustainable with or without constant, high-energy inputs, systems that use passive cooling, gravity, and natural filtration as primary tools. The knowledge locked in these rock-cut reservoirs becomes a vital mirror. It reflects our own challenges back at us, not with a prescription for the past, but with a timeless question for the future. In our quest for control and convenience, what essential wisdom of harmony, patience, and local intelligence have we left in the dust, even with all our modern tools and understanding? A profound silence lingers in these carved chambers, a series of quiet, persistent questions that the stone refuses to answer. Our studies have illuminated so much, yet they have also deepened the shadows around certain details, reminding us that the past is not a solved equation, but a conversation with gaps we are still learning to hear. Take the seemingly simple issue of gradient. We can see the perfect, gentle slope of a water channel carved for miles across a mountain face, a slope precise enough to maintain a steady flow without causing erosion. But how exactly was this achieved? What specific surveying tools did they use? A simple water level, a set of sighting poles, some other ingenious device lost to time? The precision is there in the stone, but the method for achieving it across such vast, uneven terrain remains partly obscured. Then there is the human dimension, a mystery of management and morale. We speak of projects spanning generations, of workers toiling in dangerous, dusty conditions. How did the overseers maintain morale and a sense of purpose across a lifetime of labor? Were there systems of rotation, rewards, or communal rituals that bound this immense workforce together, turning a daunting task into a shared civic destiny? The logistics of safety alone, preventing collapses in these massive excavations, hint at a sophisticated culture of worksite knowledge we can only infer from the absence of disaster in the archaeological record. Perhaps the most tantalizing mystery is one of sheer scale. Are the systems we've found the full story, or are there undiscovered, even larger networks still hidden? Vast reservoirs could lie completely silted over, their entrances buried by centuries of desert sand or jungle growth. Entire catchment areas might be disguised as natural features, waiting for a LiDAR scan or a keen-eyed local to reveal their artificial nature. The potential for discovery remains vast, promising that the map of ancient hydrological genius is still incomplete. Even the materials hold secrets. We have analyzed the waterproof plasters from Petra and Constantinople, but the exact recipes, the specific ratios of lime, ash, and crushed ceramics, and the precise mixing techniques that yielded such durable seals are nuances we have not fully replicated. That knowledge, passed from master to apprentice, may be permanently lost, a subtlety of craft that died with its last practitioner. Furthermore, our very classification of these structures might be a limitation of our modern mindset. We label them reservoirs, cisterns, stepwells, focusing on their hydraulic function. But could some have served additional, profound purposes that we are only beginning to glimpse? The precise orientation of certain stepwells, the alignment of staircases or key openings, suggests possible astronomical functions, tracking the sun or stars for calendrical or ceremonial reasons. Could the act of descending into the earth to draw water have been intertwined with rituals connected to the underworld, to ancestors, or to specific deities of the cosmos? We may be looking at multifaceted instruments, where engineering, astronomy, and spirituality were not separate categories, but threads of a single cultural fabric. To see them only as water tanks might be to miss their deeper resonance in the lives of the people who built them. These unanswered questions, however, are not failures of archaeology. They are its lifeblood. They are open invitations, reminding us that the dialogue with these ancient engineers is not a monologue where we have the final word. Every mystery drives continued research, pushing scientists to refine their geophysical techniques, historians to scour forgotten texts for clues, and local communities to share oral traditions that might hold a key. The silence in the stone is not an ending, but a space for curiosity. It ensures that our relationship with these wonders remains active and humble, a perpetual journey of discovery where each answered question reveals two more waiting in the cool, dark quiet. Their silent legacy is not a relic to be, but a mirror held up to our modern world. Our journey through these stone-carved cathedrals of water reveals far more than a historical curiosity. It a profound and enduring intelligence, one that was deeply rooted in context. These were not universal solutions, but hyper-localized masterpieces, each one a brilliant, bespoke answer to the unique personality of a specific landscape, its rain, and its rock. They stand as monuments to a different kind of advancement, a progress measured not in the scale of conquest, but in the depth of harmony achieved. Their metric was resilience, their currency was generational foresight, and their blueprint was written in a respectful dialogue with the earth itself. This challenges the very core of how we define knowledge today. We often confine wisdom to textbooks, to formal theories and abstract data. Yet the builders of Petra and the sculptors of the Stepwells remind us that true understanding also lives in the wisdom of place, the tactile intelligence of the hand that feels a stone's grain, and the sustainable logic of a design that needs no external power to endure for 1,000 years. Their knowledge was applied, holistic, and passed down through the doing. As we now grapple with a planet-wide water crisis, with aquifers draining and rivers running dry, the most advanced action we might take is not necessarily to build something new, but to listen. To listen carefully to the whispers that still echo in these cool, dark chambers. They speak of capturing what you have, not yearning for what is far away. They speak of designing with the landscape, not against it. They speak of investing in the deep time of the future, even when the cost is paid in the labor of the present. This is a fusion of past and present thinking, where ancient principles of passive design, decentralized resilience, and ecological integration can inform our most cutting-edge solutions for sustainable cities and climate adaptation. The stone has held its lesson patiently. Now it is our turn to learn, reflect on this legacy. In your view, which piece of this ancient water wisdom do we most urgently need to rediscover and weave into the fabric of our world today? Share your thoughts, for the conversation between past and present is how we build a resilient future.